Fergal, welcome to the show. How are you?
Joe, I am great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
A Irish company who is changing the way we think about healthcare. That's how I'd like to describe you. And you're moving into the US as well. And one of the things that I want to ask you, a lot of people think about family and they think about healthcare, and it's something that it's in the distant future, and that's about aging and the care that we have for people as well at the moment. And my question for you is, in the areas of effect, that's affecting healthcare and people, why did you get into it, and what did you see was the business opportunities?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Joe, I'll give you, in terms of why I got into it, it's kind of my background kind of plays a big part in that, because for the last 20 odd years, I've worked in technology sales. And so from being an individual contributor, which is a salesman basically, to running teams. And so I would have sold lots of different stuff from, big data center kind of technology to business intelligence, databases, all of that kind of stuff that makes kind of many complex systems run and operate. So whether it's pharmaceutical or banking systems or pharmaceuticals, whatever it might be, right? And so as a salesman, you're selling and your impact is, you're generating revenue, you're doing a job for somebody and you're generating revenue for a big corporation, which is great. And it's great for, if you want to raise a family, you want to buy a house, you want to buy a car, all that kind of stuff. But if you want to make an impact, you have to kind of look a little bit deeper about where you can make that impact. And I was always keen to kind of use the skills that I'd learned to try and make an impact for good and to kind of like leave the place better than when I got here, if you like. So my motivation in healthcare is, it's a tough world, right? The healthcare is probably the toughest place to actually make an impact. And the part of the world that we work in is the home is one of the toughest places to do that. And so hospitals are structured environments. They have lots of different pieces. They have, consistent shape and people to do stuff. Homes are different. And so the actual inspiration for PacSana came from an episode with my mother, believe it or not, where I came back to my parents' house one lunchtime. I was dropping in on my way to a meeting, and she had had a fall and there was nobody there. My dad was out for the day. So I wanted to said, okay, let's look at the machine that is the human person, and how do we keep that going, and how do we manage that, help that to support itself to have its most successful outcomes, which is to age well in your own home. It's kind of a long-winded way for your question, Joe.
It's what I'm hearing is you want to leave a legacy, and it was something that upset you that actually was the idea to say, okay, how can I help other people like this as well? We are living longer. Doing a little bit of research, I found that nursing homes are becoming very difficult, with people living longer, people coming more demand. There's more demand on the staff, and the paperwork and the administration as well has quadrupled. And all these things are contributing to a lack of care, maybe, in the people that are there as well. Because we've only got a certain amount of a bandwidth. Your system is to help people live at home, it's that just in case something happens to me, that I know there's someone on the other side. So what was your process from the concept of the idea that you have to what you have as a functioning technology now?
Yeah, that process, and there was a lot of people influenced that process. So probably I took the classic kind of salesman's view, which is, who are the stakeholders here? How do we kind of support each of them in their needs? And in you mentioned nursing homes, which is unfortunately in Ireland particularly has become the kind of the end line. Basically, if you go as far as a nursing home, your typical outcome is that you will be in a nursing home for 12 to 18 months. And that's unfortunately the end game. But there's a long period in the run up to getting to that nursing home that can be influenced and impacted by managing certain metrics, right? And so from us, for PacSana, when we started looking at it, we wanted to say, who are the people who matter in this equation? Obviously, the most important person is the client, the person, the older person who wants to have a successful aging and stay in their own home. They're the heart of this. Then if you're lucky, there's family carers involved, because not everybody does have, but many people do have family carers who want to participate in supporting your aging and have your best interests at heart. And then also, again, if you're in the island of Ireland, the HSE typically fund 75% of home care packages. But if you're not in Ireland, if you're in the US, private care is costly, but it's a well used service, and the private care companies are very much part of that care model. So PacSana as a system impacts all of those three, and it has to do that in order to be successful and to get the penetration it needs to grow and thrive and survive as a business. So we have to make sure that we promote independence of the clients, that we help maintain a connection with family carers, and that we support that connection through meaningful insights. But then the care companies who are our route to market, who we can ultimately sell to, are the ones that they have to see an impact on their business. And that business is business. It has to go to the bottom line. It has to be, how do I grow my business? How do I get support clients with better care? How do I, evidence care need? How do I show this, on a Sunday, and Mrs. Jones needs an extra 2 hours in the morning because of this thing or that thing. Yeah. So that was the kind of the thinking as a salesman, and that's kind of permeated the organization. But there's been loads of people helped on the way. Like I spent a year talking to people in home care, talked to people in the home product organizations, insurance companies, and lots of different people, both here and in the UK and in the US, and they helped us shape the organization. And also a bit of a shout out to the NDRC at the time, who had an incubator program that I participated in, which really helped, really kind of clarify how we talked about the business and how we articulated the message from an investment perspective.
You talk about proactive and reactive care. And I'm asking, what is the biggest warning signs for families? Because you mentioned that there, it's about staying in the home, and if you go into the nursing home, then what's the big warning signs for families that need care providers, and what are the hospitals, or what are hospitals missing at the end of it?
Yeah, so the discharge process in Ireland is pretty complex. Because I'm funny enough, where I'm sitting right now, I look across the road to one of my neighbours, and he's in his 90s. And I think there's an ambulance comes and picks him up at 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and then brings him back the next day because he's had a fall or some kind of episode. And that just seems to be kind of baked into the system now, instead of what's the best thing for him is to get him into a step down facility maybe, and get him up, improved, strengthened, fed, rested, whatever he needs treatment wise, so he can sustain himself in his own home. But the warning signs that, from a general perspective, is if we can understand changes in socialization, how much time they're spending out of the home, how much time they're spending active, how much is there changes to critical markers, and those markers for us are things that measure frailty, such as gait speed, exercise levels, movement levels, sleep patterns. And those changes to those things can be very kind of critical signals in terms of there's a change here that needs addressing. And that can call out really high risk and behaviors that are being masked to the family members, but ultimately that result in a fall or some kind of exacerbation that ends up in hospital. And then the challenge in hospital is you're into a perpetual cycle. Then to break that cycle is hard.
So what does PacSana do?
So PacSana is a remote care platform. We work with home care organizations to support and promote the independence of older adults in their own home. Independence is kind of at the heart of what we do. And from an Irish perspective, we work at Right at Home in Ireland, and they are a premier home care organization, and what they use PacSana to enhance their care offering. But one of our biggest market really is the United States, just because the levers that drive care are different over there. The HSE funds a lot of private care or a lot of home care in Ireland. The US is a much different model. It's much more commercially driven. So private care hours are much more. There's maybe 35,000 home care companies in the US that provide care of some shape or form in the home.
So the service that you provide, PacSana, what is the benefits? What is that service? You know, if you take away the glossy talk, it's for the CEO listen to this today that has an elderly mother or someone
Yeah.
who's worried about age. If you what does it do?
So if I'm an older person and I want to stay in my own home, that's an independence that I cherish. Paxana will help underwrite that. Yeah. So if I want to make sure on a personal level, if and I have many people who I care deeply for are wear Paxana, and we've a lot of customers across the US and in Ireland who wear Paxana, and the people who wear Paxana wear it to promote their own independence, to promote their independence. So what does that mean for me? I want to stay at home. That's what it means to me. If I want to stay at home, I wear the bracelet. That's it. And the system is designed, it's a very light and comfortable bracelet. You can see it there. It's designed in a way that it stays on the wrist. It lasts for battery power is 365 days. So it's fully waterproof. They don't take it off. So that's, if that's if that's our why, if you want to kind of think about what's an important part for us. Now, how do we commercialize that, and how do we make impact other kind of people in that ecosystem? Is we have a connection to family carers, and we have a business impact for home care organizations, because they're our route to market.
So I'm an elderly person and I'm wearing this band and it's connected to an app, and my son or healthcare provider has an app. What's it reading? Is it just reading that I'm moving? Is it moving that, sometimes my wife, like I wear a Fitbit, and
Mm-hmm.
my wife says sometimes I'm sitting at my desk so long, probably a beeper going off to see if I'm dead,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
and that's a funny one, because that's something that we've looked at, and that's something we would flag. So if there is at a point in time where we would be expecting you to be moving and you're not, that will alert that you've been inactive for a period. So because of the nature of the bracelet, right, we get a certain core metrics. There's maybe a kind of a couple of dozen core metrics in here that we can machine and make interesting for people to kind of like to drive activities, to kind of flag events to them. So the core things that we look for here are things like gait speed. Are you moving at a rate that enables you to perform activities of daily living? Can we tell that, if you're moving at more than 50 steps per minute, you have a fighting chance that you'll be able to do the jobs such as bathing, prepare a meal, etc., etc. Sleeping. Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping all day? Are you sleeping all night? Are you moving at nighttime? Are you getting up many times in the middle of the night? So we count bed exits in terms of how many times you've actually gone up and gone to the loo in the night. So if we can understand that, we can flag potential risk. But it's not all bad news. We can also say, look at how well you're moving, and look at, here, this is a habitual time you got up at, and this is a habitual time you got to bed at. And it looks like you're in a good position to manage your activities of daily living. And we have reports that show that and demonstrate it in really kind of simple terms, easy for people to interpret, because caregiving is being mapped on top of that, whether it's family carers dropping in, or if it's, like paid carers who are coming in to say, get somebody up in the morning, give them a cup of tea, or tuck them in at night. And that, or help them with their medication, whatever those kind of functions that are kind of defined. Movement and activity tells an awful lot.
Yeah, it's movement. It's, studies shown even strength exercise as you get older is crucial. Diet, strength exercise, longevity, not only for the body, but for the mind as well. You said you're moving or you've moved in, or you're partnered with Right to Home in the US. What have you learned about scaling and the trust within the healthcare technology as well in the US?
What I think is really interesting is that the integrity that you kind of apply to your kind of self as in all your business dealings matters, and trust and being in the market is key. So, like, I'll give you a kind of example, particularly with Ride at Home. So last week we were at Las Vegas with Ride at Home at our second attendance of their annual kind of conference for their offices. So they have about 600 offices across the US. They bring them all together in Las Vegas, and everybody kind of celebrates the wins. They talk about stuff, and we were there, invited by Right at Home, to be present and to be part of the keynote, and to tell people about how we do business, right? And that was great. But what I noticed is that trusting, particularly in healthcare world, takes time to build. It isn't, you can't just rock up into health and pretend, and people go, oh yeah, that's cool. Look at your smart bracelet. That's deadly. Let's go. They want to know that you're going to be around, that you're trusting, that you've got the right certifications, the right business model, the right lawyers. Yeah, all of those things, because everything matters. Like the contracts that you present to them need to be, enterprise grade if you're going into the enterprise universe. So yeah, it is. I suppose that if you simplify that, is you speak the language of the people that you're talking to in classic sales terms. So you got to meet them with what they expect.
Yeah, the US, you have the technology, but they're not buying the technology. They're actually buying the trust. That's what they're buying. Yeah.
Exactly. When we are in the US, so because we've been there for a couple of years now, and we have a full-time team on the ground now, and we set up in Boston, and initially the the sales guy who's on the ground was a young lad, and he thought, the Boston folks, everybody loves me because I'm Irish. And what he missed out was that they were he was getting a bit of a chat because he was Irish and he was a nice young fella, versus getting the meetings that were closable because he was pitching the right message. And that was something that we worked on together, and we coached our way out of that one. But it's important to note that when we're in the US, we're not an Irish company, we're a US company. And we never, like, the odd time, like, people will ask how, who know me on a personal level, we'll talk about Ireland and all the rest of it. But we talk and operate very much like a US Inc., because that's what we are.
Yeah, it's important. And one of the things I love about working with the US as well is they're very trusting. And you can have a real deep engagement with them as well. And you're talking about your guy in Boston. I was speaking to a founder there last week, multi-million dollar company, not last week, just the other day actually. And he said, he thought he was good at sales until he got a coach and realized he wasn't. That's sometimes people go in and they think it's talking, but you have to have a standard and you have to be able to articulate that standard, and then everybody follows that standard, and that's where the company grows. So, what for yourselves, you sales background and technology like myself, and then jumping into a new idea, a new market. What did you struggle with at the very beginning of it yourself?
That's a great question. I think probably getting used to, where I was at ground zero when I came into it was, what it looks like to actually deliver care to somebody in their own home. And that was learning that I really, really enjoyed and very, very open to, because, like, when we did our first pilots, say in 2020, just before COVID landed, I mean, this was product pilots in Northern Ireland with a company called Connected Health. We went physically into people's homes to do installations because the technology wasn't as mature as it is now. So it was a bit more involved. And in fairness, like, people bring you into your home because you're doing something good for them, and you're sitting with them, and they might have, cognitive issues. They may have, there might be aggression, there might be anxiety, all the different factors and variables that come from being an older person. And that was unbelievable learning. And I loved getting that knowledge and building. I know I'm still a baby in that, like, in high babies in terms of that understanding, but I still want, that's influenced us dramatically in terms of how we grow the business and how we kind of build systems and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a privilege to be invited into people's homes, and we understand that, and we take that very seriously.
Do you feel it made you more compassionate?
I think it probably, yeah, like, because like, how compassionate are you? Or you feel bad when you see something awful happening, but what will you do something differently is probably the measure of whether you are more compassionate or not. And we try to do stuff differently because, if we say our primary stakeholder in PacSana is the client, is the person, the older person, then we have to behave in a way that kind of respects that. So yeah, like, I think we've been forced to and we want to be. We want to be the measure of the industry we're in. We want to be leaders in that industry in technology. So we have to behave in a way that industry expects.
Yeah, and there's a big difference between sympathy and compassion.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can get into something and have sympathy because you feel okay, yeah. But as you delve into the research and do it more, that compassion comes in, because that's how you sell it as well. It's really having the compassion
Well,
and the understanding, the deep understanding of how the person, your end user, is actually feeling.
well, when we see the impacts of understanding, and then you can go, okay, actually, this, we're doing some good here. Like for instance, like we've lots of different anecdotes and stories of customers who've helped and the impact it's made. But like just last night we were on a call with the guys in Right at Home, and one of the owners in Ohio, for instance, came on and said, oh yeah, well, we had this customer who started with PacSana last August, and we weren't making any money out of it. We resold the service, and but like for the last 6-9 months, we've been looking at this data and we've been talking to them about it. And just yesterday, that person became a 24/7 case, and that's the kind of economics of it. What's really important to the business, in that they now have somebody that they're providing a lot of care to. But underneath that is somebody who they've been taking measurements from and understanding how their behaviors have changed in the last 9 months. And now they can make huge impacts, because we know because we see the
You've
impact of
seen them,
care,
yeah, yeah.
and we know what it means for when you actually start delivering excellent care to people. And I couldn't have been prouder when that kind of stuff happens. And it's good, like it's good for their business, great. But the impact is, and there's one more person who's doing a better job at living well in their own home. That's one for us.
It's going to look. This is a conversation that every family has, and I'm sure our kids will have that same conversation. And the joke that's always said, if you go to your kids, because they'll pick the nursing home that they'll stick you in,
You're not
And
wrong there.
and it's like when my mother, she had dementia, and she had it for nearly 20 years. And when she went into, I don't know, Crinkin in Shankill in Dublin, like she was there for, God, it must have been about 6 years or so
Fair
there.
play to her.
Yeah, but she ended up, not knowing who we were, and was ended up just being someone in a bed that couldn't communicate or anything. So it was the relief to see her go when at that point. But he's then, as I said, the population are aging. People are now, like, I can remember someone who used to be trained as a nurse when the nuns used to train them. And in the 80s, if you were 60 and you had a condition, you were put into a dying ward, because
Right.
that's what it was. Now, 70 is the new 50, because we're
Yeah.
evolving and we're getting better. So people do want to, and there is a strain, the healthcare system. So the more people that actually can be monitored and stay in their homes is a beneficial to the system, but also a mindset for that person, because this is where they grew up, these are where the memories are and everything as well. What are you learning from your data that the research that you have with people wearing this over a long period of time? What are you seeing now that you didn't recognize or see a couple of years ago?
What we're learning is that aging well is a long game, and the earlier you start, the better. So when we see somebody, and also that there's no time, like you can it's a bit like giving up smoking. There's no bad time to do it. There's no bad time to start aging well. So if you are somebody who has, a bunch of chronic conditions, diabetes, COPD, that's chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and you have, about, some gout or something, right? You have a combination of different things. Yes, if you can do small exercises, and that exercise it's not this, you're not looking to get you on a marathon. We want to get you standing up and down in your chair, sitting up and down in your chair, 20 times, 5 times a day. You can do that for us, then you will have a better outcome. You'll have probably better appetite, better sleep. And as a result, you will be in a better position to protect yourself from potential hazards like falling, tripping, or an exacerbation of your COPD or whatever it might be, right? But if you bring that back to, say, when you're in your 50s, and if you're potentially have a sedentary lifestyle, or you're in the menopause or whatever it might be, and you go to some sort of strength training, or if you go to some kind of consistent exercise, even just walking, we know that like the impact of those things persists dramatically if you can keep them consistent. And so it's not rocket science, But what is good about the way we do it is that we are a system that is designed specifically for older adults and to meet them where they are. So we don't, it's not a whoop. We don't want we don't want to, you to tell you, what your blood glucose level is. But we want to say to you is that movement is key. These are the movement metrics that you're generating at the moment. If we change these metrics, if we go to like, getting better sleep, getting a bit more exercise, getting a bit more movement, yeah, and leave the house, go for a walk, get up and about, then we'll be in a position to have better aging outcomes and to stay longer in your own.
Yeah, and I agree with everything. It's my wonderful wife is she's works for positive nutrition. So she's a functional medicine practitioner. And, the supplements that we're on that we take every day. And I go to the gym twice a week. And, we have the mindset that we don't do it just for health. We're doing it for longevity. And I think that's the important. I think if a family who's listening to this, they have a parent or someone who knows they want to stay in their home in the next 20, 30 years,
Exactly.
is you have to start planning now. You
And
really do. Yeah.
the earlier you start, the better. And similarly, from a PacSana perspective, like I told you about that family in the US, like
Yeah.
what is unfortunate is if people defer engaging in this process too far. They wait until something bad happens. They know in the back of their mind they're going, something's not right there. I'm talking to her on the phone and the conversation is going in circles. And when I went to see her, she was kind of a bit wobbly, but it was masked. And so then the inevitable consequences, if you leave it too long, somebody has a critical event and they end up in hospital. And the challenge with going into hospital is not that, hospitals are brilliant, but you want to get in and out of hospital as quickly as possible. And because there are places where you'll get infection, you could have lots of different stuff go on in hospitals, right? So the longer you can stay out of hospital, the better. And if you can measure and understand that risk and then manage it by putting in exercise programs, putting in some care, getting the right supports around it. And that might be just a care, that says, I'm going to help mum get up in the morning because she doesn't get up till 12 o'clock. And if she gets up at 9 and we get a bit of like a cup of tea and a piece of toast into her, she's going to be grand and she can get herself to bed at night. But we have the data that can tell that story.
I think what's resonate with me is time. Like my father passed, 84, 86, and he lived at home right to the time that he passed away, and he was, fully with it. And for me, it was every week being able to go and meet him up in, go for a pint with him in the Graduate pub. You probably know it.
I know the garage. Yeah, absolutely. And for while it's still there.
While it's still there, it's probably one of the last.
Fingers crossed. I gather there's change going on there. But anyway, listen, the garage is a great old stand of a pub.
Yeah. What you have is, being able to meet him up there every Wednesday, and we'd have a pint and tell the stories. And those memories sit with me a lot better than the memories of just my mum in a nursing home.
Absolutely.
And that's what we have. And just going back into the business there, I've seen you've mentioned the infinity game. And as you being the CEO, how do you motivate your team, and how are you building a meaningful relationship that's going to take the business into the next decade?
Yeah. So like one of the things that's key about that kind of infinite game is that you have to manifest it in all your behaviors. It's not it's not something you can just go, oh yeah, we're playing the infinite game, but I'm going to kind of like beat the hell out of you for hitting this target or hitting that number or whatever it is. So it drives everything, but it also drives your sales process. It drives your kind of support processes, everything about it. So like the team we have, we're very lucky in that we've a core team based in Dublin. We've about 6, and then we've got some remote players in Jamaica, in the Philippines, and we've got sales teams on the ground in the US. And we treat our customers the way and our clients the way we want to kind of be treated. And that's like I've come from sales organizations that were different, that were not like that. I was very conscious when I was building an organization. It would be sales focused, but it would have a very kind of different mindset to the ones that I've seen in terms of its why. And like, they talk about the infinite game and the why. And everybody needs to understand the why, and everybody needs to kind of like go to their why in their role. And they know that PacSana is focused on helping clients, but also they know that it has to have a return on investment for home care companies, and that's what they need to focus on. So yeah, like a little bit of just the clarity of vision is probably the best help, and then having people who get them up to speed and get them trusted, and then just do their job.
Yeah, it all boils down with the amount of companies that I've coached over the years. It starts with clarity, because that's the key on it. You know, a lot of founders as well, they carry a lot of pressure. Decision making, responsibility. That uncertainty. I often say that running your own business, you sleep like a baby. You wake up every 3 hours screaming. So with yourself. Well, what have you learned personally with this venture about leadership and resilience as well?
Yeah, like I've been in a lot of places with this business, I have to say. Some of them pretty dark and scary, and some of them like brilliant. And it's like, oh my God, can you believe it? And I suppose probably the most important thing is it comes back to about clarity, is that the highs are the highs, the lows are the lows, but are you still mapping a course to where you want to get to? And try and, don't get distracted by either, because they don't define, the final game. Like, particularly if as you call it, an infinite game, it's not an outcome. It's not, you're like, yes, there's investors, so there is an outcome. So like ultimately people expect, a return on that investment. But to get to that, you have to play the game you want. And so, yeah, and one of the things, and I've dealt with like huge high pressure kind of sales jobs in the past, where numbers were numbers and you were getting grilled 7 minutes a day about closing quarter and where you're going to do this and what were you going to do that and where was the year going to finish and all that kind of stuff. So that pressure isn't as kind of is not harder, but like that you're doing the right thing is. So I spend a lot of time making sure that we're doing the right thing, and whatever the right thing is, whether it's the right thing for our investors, the right thing for the team, the right thing for the business. So I spend a lot of time reflecting and trying to just keep those decisions as best that stick to our why, but also give us the outcomes that we need as a business.
I can relate to that as well. Past companies. I remember in my 20s, I had an agency, and in that agency, if you didn't perform those numbers holding that agency in 4 months, you were gone. That's what it was like. And I had that agency for 10 years. So you learn from your war wounds. And then as you get older, you get a bit more mellow when you see the structures, and you kind of go, well, I learned from that, but I want to have my team to be better. What did you get wrong to get right?
First thing I would say is we thought we were going to be in the UK. And we thought that was going to be our primary market, because there's like 75 million people in the UK and there's a whole bunch of like older adults. And when we initially kind of targeted it, it seemed like it was going to be a good place to be. And then I was participating with, and that was kind of early days. That was back in, the, 2021-ish. And we were kind of looking at setting up in the UK and all that kind of stuff. And then I was at part of the NDRC program. This was an accelerator I was involved in County Waterford, which was a brilliant program in ARC Labs. And one of the mentors came in, and he was a very successful fella, and he was very candid with me. He said, "Fergal, yeah, I see your business. I don't know enough about it to tell you it's not stupid, but it doesn't seem stupid," which was very nice of him. But then he also said, "But like, why are you not in the US? Like, why are you talking about the UK, where the NHS pulls levers and could take 10 years for you to be successful?" And I kind of sighed to myself. I was like, do I really want to be in the US? But in actual fact, when you go and looking at the numbers, it's like, yeah, of course you want to be in the US. It's like, what are you thinking of? Like, how did I miss that? So get wrong to get right. And then locating in the US, again, when we did the numbers and we did the kind of like initial kind of like go to markets and kind of like, market validation, we said the US definitely, but we went and focused on, but we set up our initial kind of location in Boston. And Boston is great from an Irish perspective, and it's a great town, but it's a bit like Ireland in some ways, in that they're culturally kind of like the people of New England. They're maybe a bit more conservative from a kind of a sales perspective than some of the other places. So, like, if I was setting up in the US again, would I be setting up in Boston? I might probably set up in Chicago. I might set up somewhere like a bit more central, that, or Atlanta, or somewhere that allows us to jump around the states a lot more. Because, like, currently we're in the Carolinas, we're in New Jersey, we're in Las Vegas, we're in California, we're in Colorado. So, hey, we're everywhere, and we're in 40 odd states. And so, we, like, when we want to spend time with customers, which we do the odd time, and we it's a much easier way to kind of move around. You're typically going into Chicago to get out to these places, but that's a small bit.
Yeah, and the States is so big. If you ever, like I spent time in San Diego, and then there was, we had an office in Washington D.C. and done a bit in New York. And the States is so vast that if you don't like a place, you'll find a place which you do like. And one of the places which we do a lot of business with as well is Texas. Texas is, people don't realize how big Texas is. And, the amount of organizations in Texas as well is colossal. And, middle America as well. It's a lot of Irish companies to sort of go for that East Coast sort of, because of the time zone. But if you just move through the time zone, you'll see that it's vast, and it's a great economy. And even at this moment in time, with geopolitics and everything, that America's booming. Like, a lot of our clients in the States are booming, where
Yeah.
there's a bit of uncertainty in Europe, and it's causing, but you have to sort of put those blinkers on. Don't let any of that get to you, and just focus on your product and your service and what you can do to help.
Absolutely. The United States is a terrific market. I find doing business there, like, refreshingly sort of candid, and people will be straight with you. And, like, what's kind of exhausting if you're selling into the Irish world is the slow no, where people will not kind of they don't want to upset you. So they'll continue conversing with you, and you don't know where you are. And, like, that's assuming there's a certain trusted relationship, because the Irish buyers can ghost you quick enough. But in the US, it tends to be fair. If you go and you push, they will say, no, this isn't right for me. Or they'll say, actually, yes, this is how we do it. And then you just have to have the maturity as a business and as a sales professional to kind of bring them through that process so that you can make a successful sale.
Yeah, look, I've been dealing with the Yanks since, 2 decades, really. I've been dealing with it, and, it, like, even sitting at home with my wife, I'll say American words and she'd look at me, what are you saying? Because I'm just so used to, garbage or the fall or candy. It's you live here in Ireland. But look, it's a great, and the opportunities are there. What's the best business advice you've ever received?
There's a bit of conflict in that one internally, right? Because there's a fellow I listen to, and the odd time, Professor Galloway. I don't know if you've come across him. He's a very interesting kind of character. But what he says in his messaging is not going to follow your heart and do what you love. It is more about, make as much money as you can in your younger years, so that work really, really hard, like absurdly hard when you can, to make, to be successful, because you'll build networks and you build resilience in your kind of finances and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot to be said for that, because, like, that kind of learning happens, and what you learn in doing that is really is critical. Like, I would have had a periods of, like, really intense work for many years, like 15, 20 years, where I worked, like, nonstop pretty much, to the point where, but in order to build, a resilient kind of personal kind of finance and be comfortable. And, there's a lot to be said for that. But you have to be, at the same time, true to your core beliefs, and that matters. So if there's that dissonance between what you want to do at your heart and what an organization wants to do, it's not a successful match. And that will come out really quickly. So just be careful about going into a business just because you can make a load of money at.
Yeah, I went into an organization, a company I invested heavily in, and we were way ahead of the market. No one had even People were laughing at us when we went into it, and I went into it from a money perspective, and I lost on it, gained a lot of experience. Now it's everywhere. Like, we got funded by Enterprise Ireland and everything. And that was DNA testing for athletic ability and nutrition. And when we
All
were
right.
doing it, everyone thought we were mad. Like we got that on Sunday Morning America. We were in all the papers, but people, but what we were charging would have been gold standard, $300 for 10 tests. And bigger, huge companies, came in and were offering 200 tests for $50.
Okay.
For me, it was the money aspect, and I kind of learned from that. So you're right. I think you have to have the belief, and there has to be an element of it. I wrote an article on LinkedIn, and I said, look, when I was younger, I was chasing money. Now, but I probably lost my soul in doing it. But now my values have changed. Family are important to me. Ethics and mean a lot. So still doing the same business, but it's changed because I've now gained back my soul, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Understood.
What advice were you given that was wrong, or the worst advice you've ever got?
I did
Genuine.
one of the things that actually my wife has always said, because when I'm kind of like losing my head and kind of getting stressed to the nines about whatever is going on, and I'm like, well, this could all blow up in our face, and we could, this and that, and what happens then? And she said, don't worry about that. You've always worked it out. You always will work it out. I'm like,
Mm.
no pressure then, but thanks, love. So yeah, like the best advice, and that actually is kind of one of the best advices that I've ever had, is that because you will always work it out. If you're
Yeah,
standing up, you've worked it out. If this year, and this will give you a little bit of perspective, Joe, in that September, my brother died of leukemia, having had a very prolonged battle with a very aggressive and nasty cancer, but had overcome it and had then got to the point where he was clear, and then he had a very quick fist fight with this leukemia that killed him in the end. And he was a big influence on me, and I miss him very much. But one of the things that like everything gets relative when you start thinking about the pain that he suffered and the things that he went through in those periods of his life, and he dealt with very grace and stoicism that was pretty inspirational. And so if if you're it's very hard to kind of like feel sorry for yourself if things don't work out in a business perspective on and somebody has to go through that. So yeah, a bit of humility and,
yeah,
find your find your
I
P's
can
and Q's.
relate to that. Yeah, my brother died of cancer. My sister died of cancer the
Goodness,
last couple of years.
that's hard.
And my sister was a big mentor. My brother was a good friend. It was Yeah, it's you do find that, and I did a TEDx back in 2019, and I talk about the exterior stuff will always get to you, but you have to focus on what's going on inside your head and protect that, because once you protect that, the external stuff is just noise. Just sometimes, in business, you may get a letter that may trigger you, or an email. All it is just words on a page, nothing more. In business and like in coaching with clients, I say, look, all you need to do is just for a moment take a step back. Take a step back, step out of the picture, you know, and then when you step back into it, it's clearer on that.
Yeah, yeah, you're not wrong.
What book would you recommend?
So I'm drawn about to a couple of different titles on this, right? And I know there's a business focus to this podcast, but there's things that have made an impact on me from a business perspective. But then I really like novels as well. I like a book that's going to be distract me and kind of bring me to another place as well. So I like we've referenced Simon Sinek and his thinking about find your why and all of that kind of stuff, and that's brilliant. And I really use that to kind of to help me structure myself going forward when I set up PacSana, so I knew kind of what our end game was. But there's a negotiating business book that you might have come across. Start with no.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the thinking behind that is, move away from kind of like this kind of notional win-win and get to the point where you understand the pain and you understand why when people will kind of like what they want to proceed with or not proceed with, because that gives you a huge amount of clarity. And so that's probably like if I was talking to somebody and saying a salesperson, start with no would be a really good place for me to kind of to reflect on. If you're kind of a leader or a new leader and you want to kind of clarify your vision around kind of what's, where you want to go, where you want to take the business and where you want to take yourself, I think Simon Sinek and Starting with Why is a brilliant read. But there's a deadly book, a novel that I'd love to people to read as well, because I love a road movie, and it's called The Lincoln Highway, and it's a real cracker. So it's about a couple of brothers who go on the road and in the 50s in America, and it's an absolute belter. If you like that sort of stuff, that's the kind of
That's
novels that appeal to me.
it's the stuff that take you out of the world and bring you somewhere else and give your brain a massage in a way.
Well, you need to show because the way the world is, right? Like, and I have my other brother who says he doesn't pay any attention to news anymore. He doesn't look at the news because it's just too bad and it's too distracting. And he's not wrong as well, but at the same time, you have to kind of just from a business perspective, you need to understand what the levers are. You can't look at it all the time, but you have to check in with it. But you also need to kind of put your brain into
Check out.
kind of down mode and have a bit of kind of relaxation. But reading is still a great kind of comfort. I love it.
Oh yeah, I have a library of books over there. I love it, and my kids are great readers. For me, it's going out for a walk with the dogs in the woods. Most of the time I won't take my phone, and it's just in listening to the birds. Listening. It's sometimes we walk and we're not engaged. We're just one foot in front of the other. But if you stop and actually listen to what's going around you, it clears the head and makes the day a better day.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
If someone wants to reach out or know more about, what you are doing there, Fergal, what's the website
So
details?
www.pacsana.com is the website, PACSANA. My email is fergaldoignan@pacsana.com, or if you can hit up info@pacsana.com, it will come to me. LinkedIn is a great place to kind of to reach out to us. At the moment, in 2026, we're working on an investment proposal. If people are interested, I'd be very happy to talk to people. We're focusing on private investors, and there's a big community active in Ireland. We're very lucky at the moment in that we've got a great investor community behind us, some very seasoned and experienced investors. We, due to our focus of growth in the US, and particularly trying to get that enterprise world, we're looking to kick on into a new gear in the US. And that's what the funding is we're raising for. So if there's anybody who's interested, please get in touch and we'll tell them all about it.
Fergal, thanks for coming on the show.
Joe, my pleasure. Thanks a million. Really appreciate you having me on. Mind yourself.